Hello, and thank you for joining me today as we continue our discussion on how food and nutrients are passed through the body. So we've talked about the alimentary canal as a whole, we've talked about the mouth and the beginning of digestion. Today we're going to talk about the pharynx, the esophagus, and the stomach. So we're going to get down to that next level of digestion taking place. And so at the end of this lesson, my goal for you is to list 3 steps involved in swallowing. So you're going to be able to describe the swallowing process. We're going to locate the pharynx, the esophagus, and the stomach within the body. We're going to label the parts of the stomach. And you're going to be able to describe this substance called chyme. So let's get started. So when you swallow, your food goes to the pharynx. And so your pharynx, to get food to the pharynx, we have 3 parts. And so the first couple parts, first part we have control over, and then things get out of our control and happen naturally. So this swallowing mechanism you'll need to be able to describe. Okay? So there's 3 parts to this. First part, we have control of this. This is the part where we chew the food, we mix it with saliva. Our tongue rolls it around, and we force it down the throat. When our tongue rolls it into this lump, this ball of food in our mouth, we call that a bolus. So a bolus is a ball of food that is a combination of food and saliva that gets swallowed. And we force this down the throat. When that happens, your swallowing reflex takes over. And so for this swallowing reflex, your soft palate raises, again sealing off your nasal cavity. Your epiglottis closes, shutting off your trachea. Your tongue pushes against the soft palate, preventing food from backing into the oral cavity. So the soft palate raising, part 1 seals off the nasal cavity. Part 2 closes off the trachea. And part 3 prevents food from going back into your mouth. Prevents food from backing into the oral cavity. And then muscles in the esophagus contract and peristalsis continues. And so that's stage 3, is this peristaltic movement of food from the esophagus to the stomach. Okay. And so here we go. You have a mass of food here that gets placed in your mouth. When you begin to swallow, you see your soft palate on the picture 2 raising up. So it goes from this point here to this one over here where it's sealed off the nasal cavity. You see your epiglottis, which is open on diagram 1, closed on diagram 2, which creates this tube to go down your esophagus. And then the last part is your tongue on this third picture pushes clear to the back of your throat, preventing food from coming back into your mouth. That is your swallowing reflex right there. And then this is what happens to the food as it travels down the esophagus. You have it go from the top to the bottom to then eventually reaching your stomach there. So your esophagus is a passageway for food. It runs right alongside your trachea, which is a passageway for air, but this is a passageway for food. Its muscular wall propels food from the pharynx to the stomach. So muscular wall moves food, and your esophagus takes food from the pharynx to the stomach. This enters or penetrates your diaphragm, and at a point called this esophageal hiatus. So esophageal referring to the esophagus, hiatus being a gap or a break. And so there's a break in your diaphragm where the esophagus passes through. But this hiatus is continuous with your stomach, which is right beneath it. So as it passes through this esophageal hiatus, food will travel through the esophageal sphincter. This is typically closed to prevent food and juices from entering the esophagus. So this is, again, closed to prevent things from going backwards. If you have acid reflux, that means you have a weak sphincter muscle, and so it kind of leaks acid back into the esophagus. That's the acid reflux part of things. After it gets through your esophagus, through your diaphragm, it gets to the structure called the stomach. Your stomach is a J-shaped pouch-like organ, which not a huge deal. But it mixes food with digestive juices. That's the important thing your stomach does. It's got a capacity of about 1 liter, so it can hold roughly 1 liter of material. It has a ton of folds. These things are called rugae, or these folds, that as your stomach expands, these rugae disappear. That's what distension means, to expand. And your stomach works kind of like a washing machine. It adds in the juices, think of that like soap. And then it mixes the food and juices together like your soap gets mixed with your clothes. And that's so as the digestive juices and then mixes the food in the juices and bounces them around. Okay, that is your stomach. Along with being a J-shaped pouch-like organ, there's different regions. There's different parts. First, you have your cardiac region. Cardiac refers to the heart. So this is where your esophagus opens into your stomach. That's the closest point to the heart, essentially. And the next region over is called your Fundic region. This is where your stomach kind of raises up or balloons up into like an air bubble. And so air gets stuck in the stomach. It fills this Fundic region, but that's the Fundic region there. Beneath that is the body. That's the main portion of the stomach. And then the last part is called the pyloric region. This is where your stomach funnels down, so it dumps into the small intestine. This pyloric region is sealed off by this thing called the pyloric sphincter, which, just like your esophageal sphincter, closes off your small intestine from receiving food until your body is ready. So it allows your stomach to digest food, and your stomach does a lot of mechanical digestion. Yes, it secretes acids, but your stomach is designed to break food down. That's the whole point. So it's a lot of mechanical digestion there until it's ready to open that pyloric sphincter and pass the food on to the small intestine. Okay, so this is kind of a view of your stomach. So this lumen region. Lumen is a space. So this is the opening. This is the opening to your stomach here. This is the shape the stomach is holding at the moment. So notice it's kind of empty. As it fills with food, it expands out these little folds, these rugae here that you can kind of see go away. But your stomach's surrounded by the submucosa, the mucosa, the muscular, all of that's still present in your stomach, shown here. Here is a scan, which the dark regions indicate air, essentially. So these two regions here are your lungs filled with air. And then this black blob is showing a gas bubble inside your stomach. It's, again, filled with air. There's not a substance there to show back on the scan. Okay, this is a better diagram showing you the different regions. And so this little space here is known as your cardiac region. Anything up here is your fundic. So again, cardiac being connected to the esophagus and esophageal sphincter. Most of this structure is called the body. So the big ballooned out portion is called the body. And then the last little bit right here is the pyloric. Where it starts to funnel is called the pyloric region, which is sealed off by the pyloric sphincter there. But that is your stomach. Whenever we refer to the term gastric, we are talking about stomach. So gastric refers to stomach. You have secretions, including we actually secrete hydrochloric acid into our stomachs. Our stomachs house this hydrochloric acid along with other digestive enzymes, which gets released into these pits of the rugae, which are folds. So as those expand out, the digestive juices get released, and then they're able to then mix with the food and substances present. There's a couple different phases of your gastric action and digestion. One is the cephalic phase. This is cephalic referring to the head. This is the sight, taste, smell, or thought of food that triggers gastric juices to be secreted. Your salivary glands secrete saliva, so your mouth starts to water. That's all cephalic. It's all in your head. Step one. I think about food. This begins to take place. 2, gastric phase. Food in the stomach is both chemically and mechanically stimulated. It does two things. Being there, it's mechanically stimulates secretion of gastric juices, and 2, it further chemically stimulates it because then we can taste the food and all of that is going on as well. So the gastric phase is the secretion and mixing of juices and food. And the last one is the intestinal phase, which is where everything that you've eaten or ingested enters your small intestine where it gets absorbed. Those are the 3 phases of gastric action. Okay, so we had talked about this thing called a bolus. A bolus is a ball of food and saliva that gets swallowed from your mouth. When it gets to your stomach, it becomes a substance called chyme. Chyme is a paste-like mix of gastric juices and food particles. So your stomach mixes the food particles and gastric juices together. Peristalsis pushes chyme towards the pyloric sphincter and makes sure it mixes really well. But peristalsis pushes it toward the pyloric sphincter, and then when it's ready to go, the sphincter relaxes and the stomach pushes the chyme out a little at a time. So your intestines can begin the absorption process. Okay? This is your stomach action. So again, here's a look at it. We have food entering the stomach. Again, this is your chyme, or your bolus enters the stomach. It mixes with these gastric juices here and becomes a substance called chyme, and then your pyloric sphincter opens, releasing little by little into the small intestine. Here are some review questions for you to look through and answer. If you have questions about anything we've talked about thus far, please come see me. Otherwise, I look forward to continuing this conversation with you as we look at food's next stop on its way through our body. But thank you very much for your time and attention today, and have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next time.